And you're ready to go. Enjoy your session.
Thanks, Kay. So welcome to another session on NIST Lightweight Standardization, and we're starting off this one with a duel of the titans, the Romulus and Remus families of lightweight AAD algorithms by Tetsuya Iwata, Mustafa Kairala, Kazuhiko Mimatsu, and Thomas Perrin. And the talk is given by Kazuhiko.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm Kazuhiko Miyamatsu, and this is a joint work with Tetsuya Iwata, Mustafa Kairala, and Thomas Perrin. So this talk describes the two families of AEAD modes based on the tweakable block cipher, Romulus and Remus. Both are using the skinny as an underlying TBC, and Romulus has a standard model security, while the Remus relies on the non-standard ideal cipher model security to use a TBC of shorter tweak, what is used by Romulus. Because Romulus is a second round candidate of the NIST Lightweight cryptography, so this talk primarily focus on it. So Romulus consists of two variants, the nonce-based Romulus N, the other is the nonce-misuse resistant Romulus M. Both consist of 3 members, but as we announced in the latest NIST workshop, we plan to reduce the family size if Romulus is selected to the next round, then only the members called N1 and M1 will remain. We also plan to reduce the number of skinny from 56 to 40 to boost the performance while keeping the large security margin. So this picture shows the Romulus N, and this is mostly the same as what Thomas presented in the invited talk. His invited talk. It has a rate operation, namely the one TBC call can process 1 message block here. And for associated data, it also can process 2 blocks by using 1 TBC call. And its state size is quite small. Essentially, the state size is what is the same as what is needed to implement the TBC itself. And this is smaller than the Theta TB3, so famous TBC-based authenticated encryption. Its computation overhead is quite small because there is no key derivation process. So this is particularly good for short messages. For example, if a message consists of the 1 associated data and 1 message block, we only need 2 TBC calls to perform the decryption. The skinny is proposed at the Crypto 2060, and it's one of the most popular TBCs, having a large number of third-party analysis papers, and there's an ongoing ISO standard process. It has a quite large security margin, and so even the new running 40-round version still has a 45% security margin for order of 2 to the 128 attacks. Its performance is excellent on hardware and good on software. This slide shows the security bound of Romulus N. It shows the n-bit security with n-bit block CPA secure tweakable block cipher, namely the tweakable pseudo-random permutation. And this proof is under the standard model, so we don't have to worry about the gap between the model and the instantiation. So the privacy bound is at most the computational security of the TBC itself. And the authenticity bound is computational security plus this small term, which is independent of the number of encryption queries and query length. The bound is effectively the same as the Theta CB3 within constant. This is a very strong bound, and this strong feature is achieved by TBC-based mode's standard model reduction. So Romulus M is a free nonce-misuse resistant structure based on SIV, and it greatly shares the Romulus N components, so it's easy to implement both. It has a standard model security as well as N variant. More specifically, it has an N-bit security under the nonce-respecting adversary, and half of N-bit, 2 N-bit security for nonce-misusing adversary, depending on the number of the repetition in the encryption query. This property is also called a graceful degradation, which is a very good property for the misuse-resistant AE. You also announced that it has a release of unverified plain text security equivalent to SIB. So this slide shows the brief performance ranking of the under edge hardware. And there's a public report here. And among the 8 candidates containing the very strong hardware efficient sponges, Romulus still achieved a very good ranking figures for various metrics. And this slide shows that, Romulus offers a very good trading off property for the throughput and area, and also energy and area. Okay, to conclude, Romulus says what we believe the best we can do for lightweight, highly reliable AEAD using TBC. It has a very strong provable security bounds under the standard model, and it is based on the well-analyzed primitive, skinny, and it is efficient because of the written operation, and its state size is essentially minimum as a tweakable block cipher-based standard model secure authenticated encryption. That's it. Thanks for listening.
Thanks a lot. The next talk is also about a candidate based on the same primitive, namely Skinny AED and Skinny Hash by Christophe Bayerle, Jeremy Jean, Stefan Kölbel, Gregor Leander, Amir Moradi, Thomas Perrin, Yusaki, Pascal Sastrich, and Sim Xiangmeng. And the talk is given by Christophe.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. So I'm going to present our schemes Skinny AED and Skinny Hash, submitted to the NIST competition and published in the special issue. And this is a joint work with the Skinny team. So our schemes, as the name says, are based on the Skinny family of tweakable block ciphers introduced in Crypto 2016. Thomas already talked about them in the invited talk, so I will not go into details here. It was designed as a flexible cipher family, tweakable cipher family, to allow for several block and tweak and key sizes. And it was designed as an academic competitor to the lightweight NSA cipher Simon, in terms of, especially in terms of hardware performance. The round function is depicted here. And in our schemes, we're using basically 2 versions. So we're using a block size of 128-bit and the tweaky size of 256-bit and 384-bit. And the number of rounds iterated are different, and so 48 and 56 rounds. So then the Skinny AED just uses this Skinny tweakable block cipher in a Theta CB3 framework, the tweakable version of the OCB. Also, Thomas explained this. So it is it encrypts the blocks in parallel and independently of each other, and each block cipher call gets the nonce and the AED key as a fixed key, and the tweak is a block counter is used as the tweak. Then we proposed 6 members in total, so 4 of them are based on Skinny 128-384, and 2 of them are based on the smaller tweak key size, and they vary in the supported nonce and tag length. And I have to say that the last 2 members, based on Skinny 128-256, do not follow the NIST requirements of supporting very long input messages of up to 2 to the 50 byte. So they're more for short data. As a security, we basically claim the same security as comes from the Theta CB3 mode, namely beyond birthday bound security in the if we assume that Skinny is an ideal tweakable cipher. So we basically have 128-bit security for the primary member. And again, we must restrict the number of messages to 2 to the 68 bytes, the size of the message, because we need that each instance gets a unique counter, and the counters should not repeat. Skinny Hash then uses a sponge construction as depicted here, and compared to most of the sponge constructions that are used, this function FL is not a permutation but a function, and this function is built from Skinny from the Skinny tweakable cipher. On the right side, you can see how this function is built for the primary member. So the 384-bit input is going as a tweaky value into 3 independent calls of Skinny with encryptions of 3 different constants. And then the output is concatenated together to form 384-bit. And as a security, we claim half of the capacity size of the security with regard to pre-image, second pre-image, and collision resistance. So that comes from the sponge. And quite interestingly, very recently, a security proof was published on the ePrint archive stating that, again, in the ideal cipher model, the Skinny hash, where the function is built as I've shown before, is indifferentiable from a random oracle up to 2 to the n queries. What is very nice about this design is that Skinny tweakable cipher, despite its rather short existence for 4 years, was already analyzed a lot. Yeah? So we found more than 30 published papers on cryptanalysis of some family members, and we gave a survey of those in the paper. And the best attacks on the 2 variants we are using in our schemes are 23 rounds for Skinny 128-256 and 28 rounds for Skinny 128-384. And those attacks are valid on the tweakable cipher, so they're not necessarily valid on our modes. So then NIST allows us to propose tweaks in case we are selected to the final round. And we plan to do 2 tweaks for our schemes. So the first one, so our first proposal is that we are going to drop all the members based on Skinny 128-256 in order to set the focus more on those schemes that formally meet the NIST requirements. And for hashing, this removal would affect the Skinny TK2 hash, so this version with the 2 calls to the block cipher. And as a second proposal, similar as we've heard in the talk before, so we are planning to reduce the number of rounds of Skinny 128-384 from 56 rounds to 40 rounds, in order to provide an improved trade-off between security margin and efficiency. So by this, we're taking advantage of the large amount of external cryptanalysis that exists already. And even with this reduction, we still get a 30% of security margin on the primitive. So in the worst case, only this would carry over to the mode. And by this, we get a performance gain of about 1.4. And these new variants are denoted by a plus sign in the end. And this is going to conclude my talk. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you, Christophe. So next candidate to be presented is the French DAC Saturnin by Encanto, Sébastien Duval, Gaëtan Laurent, Maria-Naya Plasencia, Léo Perrin, Thomas Bourna, André Schrottenloher. I say André, it's André, sorry, that's going to give the talk.
Thank you, Christina, for the introduction. Okay, can you hear me? Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to present this work with the joint work with the Saturn team, as you said. So at the beginning, we wanted to design a cipher. I wanted it to have very strong security arguments. So we went for an SPN cipher, and we went for using the white ray strategy, just like in the AES. But we also wanted to have a maximal quantum security. And so we used keys of 256 bits and blocks of 256 bits. And actually, if you have a look at the 13, I think, second round candidates in the competition, which are based on block ciphers, Saturn is going to be the only one with such large blocks. I also chose carefully the modes of operation so that they could have quantum security arguments. And finally, of course, we wanted it to be lightweight and efficient in hardware and software. So we have a design that is bit slice, that will allow bit slice implementations, and which is built of very small components. So let's have a look at the state of Saturn. As you can see, it's very lightweight. if we go a bit more into the details, we represent it, so this 256-bit state, as a cube of 4 by 4 by 4 nibbles of 4 bits. And so this is a representation. The cube representation is the one to describe the operation, so cipher. But actually, in the implementations, it's going to be implemented as 16 registers of 16 bits. And the correspondence is, as you can see on this slide. So the operations on this state are going to look a bit like the AES, as I said. So in each round of Saturn, we're going to have an Xbox layer. The Xbox layer applies a single 4-bit Xbox to each of the nibbles. There are actually 2 different Xboxes, but I won't go into the details. There is a nibble permutation that is going to be applied. There is a mixed columns that is going to mix in the columns of the cube. And something a bit special is that when we do a nibble permutation, which happens every 2 rounds, we apply the inverse of this permutation afterwards. And also every 2 rounds, we have this subkey addition, either of the master key, either the rotated key, and our run constants, and so on. So this nibble permutation is something that is going either to permute the nibbles to do like a shift rows in the AES, either in the slices of the cube or in the sheets of the cube, depending on the number, on the round number. And if we have a closer look at what it does, looking at 4 rounds of Saturn, we have these operations that are going to apply Xbox layer, mixed columns, and every 2 rounds, a shift rows, nibble permutation in the slices of the sheets. And so actually, if you look at the cube, if you flatten the cube and look at all the columns, as 16-bit nibbles, actually the super Xbox representation of Saturn looks also like an AES. It will be an AES with 16-bit nibbles that mixes either in the rows or in the columns of its state. And it will be a bit like an AES with a transposition, basically, just like the block cipher square, which was its predecessor. This prompts us to use 10 super rounds for the standard Saturn to have a security which looks, which is a bit like the AES. So, but the modes of operation, we define several modes of operation for AAD, for hashing, and we also have an additional mode for small AE. So if you have less than 128 bits to cipher, you can basically do that with a single encryption by Saturn. Otherwise, the main submission is the following. We encrypt with the counter mode, and then we use a cascade MAC, which absorbs the authenticated, the associated data, and then the ciphertext. And we use different long constants for domain separation. So like in the talk of Thomas, it would be like a very small tweak. So to conclude, we wanted to choose to have a design which had some quantum security, or at least improved security against quantum adversaries, which is why we chose this block cipher at 256 bits, and also well-known modes with quantum security proofs. So performances are also good in hardware and software, but I won't go into the details, so you can have a look at the paper. And we also believe that, of course, Saturn offers a very high classical security. And finally, as Maria mentioned in the RAM session, there is an open cryptanalysis challenge about the related key security of Saturn. So I encourage you to have a look at the webpage. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, André. The next talk will be about interrupt secure lightweight parallel AE modes by Avik Chakraborty and Nilanjan Ashwin Jha, Cuauhtemoc Macías Lopez, Meridul Nandi, Yu Sasaki, and it's Avik that's going to give for this presentation.
Thanks, Christina, for the introduction. So I'm now sharing my screen. Can you see it? Yeah. So is it in full screen mode now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So hello everyone. So as Christina has introduced, that I'm Avik Chakraborty, and today I'm going to talk about two inter-UP secure lightweight parallel AE designs, and namely Lotus and Locus. And I would also like to mention that these two designs have been submitted to the NIST Lightweight Crypto Competition. And this is a joint work with Nilanjan Datta, Ashwin Jha, Kuatemo Pencilas Lopez, Mridul Nandi, and Yusuf Sasaki. So let's start with the presentation. Okay. So first, I would like to talk about design choice. So we have chosen a parallel mode because a parallel mode is a kind of, so we can design some special schemes using parallel modes, which can perform well enough, which can have a efficient implementation in a faster platform, as well as it can have an efficient implementation in lighter platform. Like if we use a client server architecture, it can be very efficient. The second aim we actually made is to achieve a high security. So we adopted two techniques. One is nonce-based rekeying, and another is masking to get high security in the standard model, to get high security for privacy and in CTXT security. And since we are aiming for high security, and the security bound is actually a function on the state size, so we can eventually reduce the block size or state size to achieve a desired security bound. And last but not the least, which is very important, is integrity under the released unverified plaintext settings. And here we are adopting a new technique of extracting some intermediate states from each of the round and computing a checksum, which is called intermediate checksum, and process this checksum at the final stage to generate the tag. So overall, we are adopting three techniques: nonce-based rekeying, masking, and extracting intermediate checksum from some hidden internal state. So I'll come to it later. And in turn, we can provide a lightweight parallel AE mode, which provides privacy security and a high integrity and inter-UP security. Okay. So Lotus stands for lightweight OTR with RUP security. So as I have mentioned that we are aiming for parallel modes. So definitely we are starting with some base construction, and here we have chosen OTR construction, which is one of the most popular parallel modes. And we can provide an inverse-free design, and thus it is suitable for combined encryption and decryption implementation. And Locus stands for lightweight OCB with RUP security, where the base mode is OCB mode. And it can give even a smaller state size, but it is not inverse-free. That's why it is suitable for encryption-only implementation. Let's come to the structure. So Lotus and Locus actually differs in the message processing phase, whereas the associated data nonce processing phase are exactly the same. So this is the AD processing nonce and AD processing phase. And here, instead of using a block cipher, we are actually using a tweakable block cipher. And this tweakable block cipher is very special because in most of the cases, in tweakable block cipher, tweaks are used as a counter, but here we are using the tweaks to separate the domains, and tweak will work as a domain separator. So let's go into details. So it is EIKN, 2, and it's this EIKN, 2 we are actually using a nonce-based key, and the key can be computed as alpha to the power I into kn, where kn is equal to key plus nonce, and this 2 is actually the tweak. So we have observed that every design has like maximum 15-16 domains. So 4-bit tweaks are sufficient to represent all possible domains. So that's why we are adopting a tweakable block cipher with short tweaks, or in other words, we can call it short tweak TBC. This is the message processing phase of Lotus. So it works, the structure is close to OTR, and we are using some additional operation of extracting this intermediate state Ws to compute the checksum W XOR to process the last block and generate the tag. And this V XOR comes from the associated data processing phase, which checksum from the output of the TBCs. Okay. And this is the message processing phase of Locus, which is structurally close to OCB. And again, we are extracting the intermediate states from it and process it with the last block and generate the tag in the same way as the Lotus. Okay, now I'm coming to the underlying primitive. So we are using a short tweak TBC, or small t and BC, which we call elastic tweak framework. And in elastic tweak framework, we are actually taking a standalone block cipher, and we are taking a very short tweak t, and we are expanding with a high distance encoding to compute an expanded tweak TE, and then injecting this tweak to the block cipher state after few number of rounds. Okay, so and this choice is actually heuristic. It depends on the like how much security we can get from the designs. And we are recommending using TWI-GIFT, which actually adopts GIFT64, which is a well-known block cipher with 64-bit state as the underlying block cipher. And we are taking a 4-bit tweak. We are expanding it to a 16-bit expanded tweak. And we are injecting this tweak after every 4 rounds. And in GIFT64, there are total 16 4-bit nibbles. And we are injecting each bit of the expanding tweak to each of the 16-bit nibbles. So this is the overall structure of the tweakable block cipher that we are using here. Now, it is not a standalone block cipher, and it's some updates over a standalone block cipher. So that's why we need some additional cryptanalysis over this TWI-GIFT. So first, I would like to say that in security against related key settings with 0 tweak difference, it is exactly the same as GIFT64 because, and we have found that in 2019 CISP, Yu Sasaki and Liu actually provided an upper bound of 2 to the power minus 69. And upper bound of the related key differential characteristic 2 to the power minus 69 to minus 79. Sorry. Now coming to the security against related key setting with tweak difference. So what we actually did, GIFT64 has 28 rounds, and we are leaving the first 2 and the last 2 rounds, and we are dividing the intermediate 24 rounds into 6 cores, and each core is 4 rounds. And we found that each core has a characteristic 2 to the power minus 16, and the best and the overall the upper bound of the characteristic will be 2 to the power minus 96 because there are total 6 cores. And we have also found one differential characteristic which is 2 to the power minus 30 before 1 core. So it will the lower bound, which is one of the worst, and in that case the lower bound will be 2 to the power minus 192. So the actual differential characteristic will actually lie between minus 96 and minus 192. And here, okay, in case of security against single key setting, we have found that the 4 round has characteristic 2 to the power minus 25.6. So if we, so for 6 cores, it is 2 to the power minus 153.6. And actually, we have found that in this case, we can achieve. So in this case, we can achieve 2 to the power minus 64 characteristic at 16 rounds. So we still have 12 rounds in buffer. And here we can achieve, if we have 3 cores, then it will surpass 2 to the power minus 64. We are getting 2 to the power minus 77 something. So that's why we can achieve the desired bound after like before a fewer rounds before the actual round numbers. And we have also implemented Lotus Locus on FPGA platform, and so honestly this is actually a low area implementation, so we are also planning to achieve a faster implementation of Lotus and Locus, and we will report if we can.
Avi, I'm sorry, you're running out of time, so just try.
I have only 1 slide. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So so this is a benchmark of Lotus and Locus, and you can see it performs really well, and it is on Vertex 7. And finally, I would like to come to the security bound, and we have proved the privacy security and inter-UP security. So inter-UP implies int CTXT, so proving inter-UP security is sufficient. And we have seen that we can provide n plus k by 2 security for the privacy bound, and we can provide order of sigma square by 2 to the power n plus k plus qv by 2 to the power n for the inter-UP bound. And the first part comes from the non-trivial collision in the inputs as well as the tweak, and the second part comes from the forging attempts, because qv is the, let's say qv is the number of forging attempts. So this is all for the security bound for the Lotus and Locus modes, and both of them actually exhibits the same security bound. So this is all from my side. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for a nice talk, Avik. I see there are no questions in the Zulip chat. So before the next talk, I would like to invite everyone who has a question, just please post it there. The speakers will have time to prepare an answer like this. And without further ado, let's move to the next talk, which is PyJamask, block cipher and authenticated encryption with highly efficient masked implementation. with a busy author list, and the talk will be given by Stefan Kölbl. Stefan, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction, Damian. Is the audio good? Yeah, this is in this talk I would like to give you an overview of our NIST lightweight candidate Peter Musk. And yeah, this is joint work with Damon, Jeremy, Thomas, Mathieu, Yu, and Shanbeng. So what we're targeting with PGMask is authenticated encryption with associated data. And in specific, we want to have like an block cipher and authenticated encryption scheme, which allows us to do very efficient masked implementations in software. So one of our main design criteria here was, we wanted to minimize the number of 32-bit end operations. So in masking, the costs largely correlate with nonlinear operations. And therefore, we want to minimize the ends. And specifically, we target 32-bit because it's a very popular word size for microcontrollers and also helps us utilize high-end platforms. As already also mentioned by the previous speaker, so it's kind of nice to have also parallelization. So this might not be too relevant on microcontrollers, but like as he mentioned on the server side, you can use this parallelization then to still get fast software implementations on those platforms. And while masking is our main application, we still want to get acceptable performance in an unmasked setting. We also wanted to use like well-studied components and also well-studied mode to have strong security arguments, because it is a new design. And I think for competition, or if this gets standardized, you want to have strong security arguments, basically. So just to give an overview, so PGMask consists of a family of two. So they're both based on block ciphers. One uses PGMask 128 with 128-bit block size, and the other one PGMask with 96-bit block size. And in both cases, we based it on the OCP mode, which gives us, as mentioned before, the parallelization. So this was something we wanted to have here. So I just want to give you a quick intuition how the underlying block ciphers look like. So here we used the LS design. So this is a popular design choice to make bit-sliced implementations. And it works like this. So we apply the S-box on columns of 4, respectively 3 bits, and just do this in parallel 32 times. So as our S-box is a bit-sliced design, you can basically compute the whole S-box in parallel on all 32 columns. Then the second component is just responsible for the diffusion across the columns, which is just using a matrix to multiply with each row here. And the key schedule also follows a similar design, only that it only uses linear operations. So when we were deciding the S-box, we were looking for an S-box which helps us with our criteria, so minimizing the number of ends. But we also wanted to ensure that it helps in the trail propagation across the rows. So if you just take any S-box, you might end up with situations where differences stay in the same row, and this we want to avoid. We found the S-box which fits this criteria, and it also has optimal differential and linear probabilities. And we only require 4 ends. Maybe one thing more on the S-box. So as I mentioned, you can compute this bit slice, but the nice thing with this S-box is also if you have like a 64-bit word size on your CPU, you can still do it in parallel. So you can do the 2 ends and computing it in one 64-bit operation. So regarding the diffusion matrices, so as we really focus on the masked implementations, we do not care too much about the costs of those. So these are basically 32 times 32 binary matrices. And our goal was to have a high branch number so we get good bounds against differential and linear attacks. And we ended up finding some circulant matrices which have a compact representation and a high branch number of 12. So the nice thing is also with the circulant matrices that you can just, you need only one 32-bit word to store them and can just rotate each row, which is very cheap on the microcontrollers we target. So in the last part of the talk, I just want to give you some general performance overview and comparison with other designs. So first, to give a good indication how easy it is to mask a design, it's a good idea to look at the number of AND gates you require. So on the left side, we just compare it with another 96-bit block cipher. And then we compare it with a lot of different 128-bit block ciphers. So you can see that low MC is basically the lowest AND gate. It's maybe, you could see it a bit more as an extreme variant of this idea, reducing the AND gates. So it will not have the same software performance, but has a very low AND count. While a lot of designs who are also good in bit slice masking implementations are around the same number of AND gates as PGMask, like for instance, Nucon. Then in the paper, we also provide a direct comparison for highly high order masked versions of implementations. In specific, we compare it with the higher order mask implementation of AES presented at Eurocrypt 2017. And as you can see, in the bottom is basically the degree of masking, and the higher the degree of masking, the bigger the gap becomes between AES and PGMask. So as a final comparison, I just want to explain a bit this argument that, okay, it's very good in higher order mask implementations, but we also want it to be performant if you don't use higher order masking. So this is a comparison on the Cortex M3 done by Rice Weatherly. So you can find the link below. It's very nicely implemented, or took a lot of implementations also from the NIST Lightweight competition and optimized them for this platform. And the performance here is given relative to Chacha 20 Poly 1305. So if you see like a 1 on the side, that means this design is as fast as Chacha Poly 1305 on Cortex M3. And as you can see, so there are some designs are faster, especially for shorter inputs. But PGMask is still kind of not too far away from Chacha 20 in this comparison. So I think the factor is around 0.7 or so. So even if you do an unmasked implementations, the performance is reasonable on those platforms. And this concludes my talk, and thank you.
Thank you for a very nice talk, Stefan. So the next speaker will present algebraic and higher order differential cryptanalysis of PGMask, which is convenient because we just saw everything about PGMask. The work is authored by Christoph Dobrownik, Jan Rotella, and Jan Schoene. I hope I got it right. And Jan will give the talk. We can't hear you, Jan, if you're speaking.
Sorry, clicked the wrong button.
Right.
Good. So thank you for the introduction. So I did this work together with Christoph and Jan Rotella. Christoph Dobrownik and Jan Rotella, I should mention both of them. So it's the algebraic higher order differential cryptanalysis of PGMask 96. So yeah, we already know PGMask is the second round NIST candidate. We had a talk about that before. Also, the two family members have already been discussed. So that saves me a lot of time. But we focused our research on the PGMask 96 block cipher. So, and what we obtained was a full round key recovery attack. And I will explain a little bit how we did that. So we used the bounds that were described in the PGMask specification that used the techniques by Bourra, Cantot, and de Cagnière, and also the theory of higher order derivatives by Lai, to find that if you take specific affine spaces of dimension 94, you can get this expression that you see here. So after 11 rounds of PGMask, you will get constant values. So the word certain is very important because The theory itself just says you can get up to 10 rounds, but if you choose your affine space in a smart way, you will get to 11 rounds. So then what does the attack look like? Because 11 rounds is not enough. PGMask takes 14 rounds. So you need to do something else. So, and since we are because of the high diffusion, we had a more easy approach with the attack to go backwards with this distinguisher, as you can see here. So we can go 11.5 rounds backwards. The half round is the linear part of the round. And then the forward part is just setting variables for key bits and then evaluating 2.5 rounds of PGMask and doing something with the polynomial expressions that you will get. So what I just said, we take the key bits as variables and we get systems of equations. So then we need to linearize this and then we can solve for the key bits. However, the number of monomials is way too big for this to give a solution. So we have several attempts to reduce the number of monomials. And the first one is by using the properties of the S-box. If you spell out the algebraic normal form of the S-box used and then apply a linear layer, you can see that you will get something like this. It's a quite difficult formula, but if you then apply the linear layer, which is L, and do a key addition, the only real monomials you will have are these mixed terms, because we can take an equivalent key for this and an equivalent plain text here. So that will reduce the monomials by a lot. But still, that is not enough. So we also need to do a little bit guess and determine. So we guess 100 of the round key bits, specifically the entire first round key, and then 4 bits in the second round key. And that will reduce the number of monomials to a number that is low enough for us to be able to solve the system of equations that we get. So in total, we will get this key recovery attack with a complexity of 2 to the 115 on the full round PGMask 96. But it does not work on the AEAD scheme. So that is something that other people can work on. And also for PGMask 128, our attack did not work. So this is basically the end of my presentation. So I would like to thank Christoph and Jan for their collaboration on this, and thank all of you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan, for a very clear talk. We can move to the final presentation of the session on the cryptanalysis of fork ciphers by Augustin Barion, Nicolas David, and Gaëtan Laurent. And Augustin will give the talk.
Hi, can you hear me? Hi.
Yes, we can. Yes.
Good. Okay, let me start. So I will present during this 5-minute session our work, cryptanalysis of fork ciphers, by Gaëtan Laurent, Nicolas David, and myself. So the fork cipher framework was introduced by Andriva and Al in Azure Crypt 2019. A fork cipher outputs 2 ciphertexts C0 and C1 instead of a single one. It forms a family of authenticated block cipher, as the second one can be interpreted as a MAC. They are usually constructed from tuckable block ciphers. For now, there are 2 instances of the framework, fork AES derived from AES and fork skinny from skinny. So the plaintext first goes through Ri rounds of this block cipher. Then the state is forked, and it goes respectively through R0 and R1 rounds of block cipher to output C0 and C1. Note that TKI and TK0 are the exact Twiki material from the base block cipher, and TK1 is derived a bit differently. So because there are 2 ciphertexts, there is a new attacker model, and we were interested in finding cryptanalytic results on this. So there are new oracles accessible to the attacker. So the first one is the encryption and decryption through the first branch, but this is exactly the same oracle as the underlying block cipher, as the 2 key material is exactly the same, and is R0 plus R1I is the total number of rounds of the base block cipher. So the second oracle is interesting because it's like the first one, but TK1 is generated differently from TK0. And actually, we have an attack on Fox-Skinny that exploits a weakness in the generation of TK1. So our attack is an impossible differential related key attack on Fox-Skinny 128-256. So usually in Skinny end-to-end, it is possible to make the 2 key difference inactive for 3 rounds consecutively, but every 30 rounds. However, in Fox-Skinny 128-256, the first branch is of length 27, and this is particularly advantageous for the attacker, as it is possible now to have 6 inactive 2 key difference rounds right before the forking point, and then there are 27 rounds of the first branch, which makes 27 2 key schedule rounds, and then we come up with the first 3 rounds of the second branch having no 2 key difference. Note that anyway, even if we have a different number of rounds of the first branch, if it's odd, we can always add 1 inactive 2 key round, as we XOR the 2 key difference only every 2 rounds to the state. So we win 3 rounds because we win 3 inactive 2 key difference rounds compared to the existing attacks on Skinny 128-256. And we can attack up to 26 rounds. The second interesting oracle that emerges from the framework is the reconstruction query. So out of one of the 2 ciphertexts 0-1, we can ask for the other one. Actually, this implies a lack of diffusion in the middle rounds, as it's constituted of decryption rounds followed by encryption rounds. And our attack on 4KS exploits this lack of diffusion. So our attack is a reflection differential. So it's a truncated differential, but for the reconstruction query. We suppose that we attack only weak keys. So we have an hypothesis on the key where the middle key has 0 in diagonal bytes, which makes it the differential pass with probability 1 the middle rounds. And we won't only generate twin pairs. We won't only generate single pairs, but we will generate twin pairs, which have the following property: if P passes a characteristic, then P prime also, but with a much higher probability. And we can efficiently generate both pairs at the same time. And this leads to an attack on the full version of 4KS. So we can attack a fraction 2 to the power minus 32 of the total keys with a time complexity of 2 to the power 75. And we have a variant of this attack with no key hypothesis that attacks all keys with a time complexity of 2 to the power 125. So a bit better than the exhaustive search. So to conclude, the Fox ciphers bring a new attacker model, and therefore more freedom to the attacker. Both existing instances of the Fox cipher framework have security loss compared to the underlying block cipher. Fox Skinny loses 3 rounds compared to Skinny, and the full version of 4KS 5.5 can be attacked using the new reconstruction query. Thank you.
Thank you, Augustin, for a very nice talk, and big thanks to all the speakers of the session as well. And now let's take the questions. Okay, let me start then. So there is one question from the audience, from Bart to André. And the question is, if I understood well, Saturnin CTR Cascade and also Saturnin QCB are designed to be Q2 secure, could you elaborate a bit on which use cases you envision for Q to secure lightweight cryptography?
Okay, thanks for the question. So first of all, you understood well. So both all our designs are so we want to meet quantum security in the superposition query model. So I believe this is an interesting. So I won't go into if whether superposition queries are meaningful attack model or not. I believe this is meaningful. There are many reasons for that. It's also more natural for quantum security proofs to have them. And I also believe that there are use cases for lightweight cipher, which can be used in both in software and hardware and so on, which is the case of Saturn. So we wanted to be both efficient in hardware and software. And so maybe in the intersection between this like cross-platform efficiency and the fact that we wanted the best security available against quantum adversaries, then there is a use case that you're speaking of. I think it's good to. It was good even to for us. It was good also to try to see whether it was possible to have that and still at the same time to be efficient and competitive. And I think it was the case. It's also nice to see that we can have quantum security not at the expense of being lightweight. Hope it answers your question.
Thanks. Thank you for the answer. Maybe if Bart is here and wants to answer back to André.
He said thanks for the answer on the chat. So I guess he's happy with the answer.
Yes, I said thanks for the answer.
Oh, yes. Okay.
I think it's theoretically interesting, but the question is indeed what for real lightweight applications, because the thing I wondered was, I don't think I will ever happen in my life that a lightweight device like a wearable carries a quantum computer. So that's why I was wondering. But I think I agree in general, it's an interesting question. Thank you for the answer.
I'm sorry, I have a very small question for Jan or Stefan, depends on PyjaMask. So is there something that could be changed, so like components in the cipher so that this attack does not work anymore?
Yeah, I think it's quite difficult because it goes contrary to our design goal to increase the degree in each round more. And at the moment, we also feel like, yeah, I mean, if you use it in the mode, it's very far away from the data limits you can actually use. And I think, if I remember correctly, also they have an attack in the paper on the AED, and it goes, I think, to 8 out of 14 rounds. So it still feels like there's quite a big security margin against this type of attack in the setting we look at.
Okay.
Yeah, I can confirm. Also, I think if you add 1 round, you might think, of course, the attack doesn't work anymore because we can get to 11 rounds. But then the practical thing comes in that the bounds are just bounds. So maybe the degree of the function is actually lower. So I would not guess on just adding 1 round. But exactly what Stefan said, just we could not break the AEAD scheme. And also, it's not the main candidate. That's also the important thing.
Okay, thanks a lot.
I have a small question for Kazuhiko. So you had a number of performance numbers in your talk. Were those for the old variant before the tweak or for the variant after the tweak and the reduced rounds?
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you well. So could you repeat? Sorry.
So you had some performance numbers in your talk. Are they before or after the tweak of the design?
It's before the tweak, so it's the original version, I meant. Yeah.
Okay, so you expect the numbers to be better after the tweak?
Yeah.
And maybe a question to both you and Christoph. So you took the same primitive, but then took slightly different approaches to the authenticated encryption. Can you maybe compare your designs and explain what your focus in design was?
I think our main motivation was to have this parallelism that we get from the theta CB.
And in my case, Romulus is completely serial for both encryption and decryption. So then we try to minimize the state size without losing other properties like the rate and So that's quite different and interesting. Also some kind of in orthogonal direction, but both are meaningful, I think.
Thanks for the answer. Maybe I will have a follow-up question to exactly this. So given these two different, I would say, details in the design strategy, what would be the different sets of applications that would benefit from these two designs respectively? You know, since lightweight crypto is all about serving applications which just cannot make use of general purpose crypto because they have very specific constraints.
Yeah, for me, so it's something general question to the crypto, symmetric key crypto, I think. So we community are designing to a better and better primitive in terms of the performance and say number of the cycles and the performance and the memory. And as an industry person, I think still the industry is very hesitated to take an advanced lightweight one. So I'm not sure if this is an answer to your question, but then so different type of primitive for serial and the parallel one will have will serve a good performance for the existing one anyway, I think. So for example, if we compare the GCM, say some serial candidates on microcontroller will perform a lot better, right? And and at some point that then I think that people will find that then if it performs anyway better than the standard, people will want to use it.
So essentially, somehow we're replacing the general purpose standards anyway.
Anyway, at some point. And before that point, whatever the primitive is good in the parallelizable situation or good for the small hardware, I think it's nothing happened before that point. So I think what we are doing is to pushing the people from the outside to get more attention. I'm sorry, I'm debating your question, certainly. But anyway.
Yeah, that's very good. I think that's the purpose. Thanks for the answer.
Thank you for your answer.
Christoph, do you want to add anything?
Maybe to add that, so this theta CB is also quite efficient if you have only short messages, because then you only need, so if you want to encrypt n blocks, for example, you need m plus 1 calls to the primitive. So this could also be one advantage.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for the answer.
So it seems we have one more question. It's a question by Bart for Avik.
Yeah.
So Bart says, you seem to tweak your block cipher both through the key as a mask on top of the key. So if this is so, can you explain the reason why you did not stick to just one way of tweaking?
But can you please elaborate what do you mean by just one way of tweaking? Bart is online.
Yes, I'm online. So you have this 2 to the I times k plus n, and that's the key.
Yeah.
So you have kind of a tweak going into the key.
Yeah. So actually, this is more for implementation issue. So if you consider the tweak, it is actually for the domain separator. It's
okay,
not.
but it is a tweak.
Yeah.
But you also do a tweak that you add.
Yes, but it is for implementation issue because we can use one state to update the key.
Okay.
So, for example, like alpha to the power I-1 into kn. So in the I-1th round, and then we can just update it multiplying by alpha.
Okay. Yes. Yes. Okay. That's why you do this. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I would have a question for Augustin. So you had these two attacks, one on fork KS and the other on fork skinny. And my question is whether the attack on fork KS that uses the reconstruction query does in any way carry over to fork skinny, or if fork skinny does not have the vulnerability that is needed for this.
So, well, I think you can extend a bit the attacks that exist on skinny on fork skinny. However, the authors of the 4KE instance increased the rounds on each branch of fork skinny. So the branches have more than half the total rounds. So they put 3 extra rounds in both branches. So this makes 6 more rounds to attack if you use the reconstruction query. And I don't think that attacks can attack 6 more rounds of for skinny using the reconstruction query than the corresponding skinny. So,
indeed.
So yeah, the branches are constructed, well, they're just of a longer size. And that's
okay, thank you for the answer. And maybe as a follow-up question, so as a consequence of this, diff imbalancedness between the initial pre-processing and the branches, you had some observations that a certain number of routes allows you to mount some nice attacks, right? Like this 27 rounds for the branches. Yeah. So according to your insights, combined also with this extra protection for the branches that we wanted to have with fork skinny, is there any other configuration of R init and R0, respectively R1, that you would recommend? You know, like how would you move this point to still protect the branches and also avoid these nice gifts for the attacker?
So actually, I think 27 rounds is badly chosen, but it's really specific because the Twiki schedule has a period of 30 rounds, almost. And if you choose an even number of rounds for each branch, you have the same problem, but using the reconstruction query. So if you use an odd number of each branch, you can add 1 inactive Twiki rounds when you encrypt and decrypt from the second branch. But you can't, you can, if you use an even number of rounds on each branch, then you have the same thing happening for the reconstruction query. So I don't think that you can choose a parameter that doesn't improve attacks on base skinny, because it improves attacks on reconstruction query if you choose an even number of rounds. But the security margin is really high anyways of skinny, so it's not a big problem of losing 1 round. So
okay, thank you very much.
Parameter, just not 27, is good.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the answer.
Maybe another question for Christoph. So you built this hash function from Skinny where you need several calls to the tweakable block cipher for each block that you process. Have you done a comparison of the impact of this compared to using permutation directly? So both in terms of maybe the area you need, but also maybe you have any gains from the fact that you have a function instead of a permutation.
Which permutation, for instance? So it's there is no, so it's not so easy to make it a permutation. So in the way we designed it, it is not guaranteed to be a permutation. So it's just a function. So I mean, you could use it with the fixed. For example, you can fix the tweak key to some constant and then have a permutation, but this would only have 128-bit block size. So in this case, we would have to design a primitive with a much larger block size. And this is not the way we wanted to go.
So you think in terms of implementation characteristics, so it would have been worse if you make a dedicated primitive using similar operations as Skinny than just using Skinny directly?
We did not make a comparison, so I don't know exactly. We did not make the comparison, but I think it would have been not so efficient. Yeah, for example, you need a 16-bit S-box, for example, or you have a larger number of cells in the states. And so the linear layer would be more expensive. But we did not make a comparison.
I would have one more question for Stefan. So I think what would be an interesting comparison is if you took PyJamask, protected at a certain order, certain order of masking, and then look at the leveled modes, such as Spook, for example, and targeting the same level of protection, and then compare the performance of the two. So do you have any insight on this?
Yeah, I fully agree. It's actually quite hard to find, in general, results on higher order masked for comparison even. So we didn't do that, apart from the comparison with AES in the paper, because there we had a solid implementation. But yeah, someone should do that, so we have a good picture in the NIST Lightweight competition on how things directly perform in this setting. Yeah. Right. And do you or anyone from your team foresee this work, or do you know that anyone is working on this? I'm not. I think there was some discussion on the mailing list, but I'm not entirely sure now. All right. So on the NIST Lightweight mailing list for PhD students, right? Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the answer. Okay, maybe I can continue a question spree, and then I'll be completely out of questions. This one would be for Andre. It's very quick. I saw when I looked at your the longer slides that you're actually using a key XOR tweak to do this tweaking, and then you have to look at related key security. So have you considered tweaking your design natively at any point when you were thinking about this, and if not, why not?
Okay, thank you for the question. So first of all, the XORing key and tweak wasn't in the original NIST submission. It's something that we proposed in the update for the third round, where we want to use, basically, we want to use Saturn QCB, which is a mode for authenticating encryption, which requires a tweakable block cipher. And so to have a tweakable block cipher, but with the quantum security, we needed to XOR the tweak and key in Saturn, which requires a rated key analysis, which is why we launched a challenge at the same time. I think it will be possible. So it will be possible to add the tweak elsewhere, I guess, to tweak the design. We just went for a different, more generic, tweak. I guess in both cases, anyway, we need an analysis of the actual design. What is nice is that maybe when we XOR the tweak and the key, since the key schedule in Saturn is linear, this is exactly related key security. There is not much more, I would say. So I guess maybe it makes also the analysis and the analysis of the attacks easier actually. Can also be reduced in the security of the hash function. So there are different good reasons for that.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the answer.
So I guess we can probably stop now. It's already lunchtime.
I think we're exactly on point. 1 minute overdue.
Yeah.
Yes, I think.
Thanks to all the speakers again.
Time. Yeah,